Welcome to Raven Talk, the official podcast of the Raven Tribe. The Raven Tribe is a home for warriors on the path, and is dedicated to training warriors for the battlefield of life. Visit us on the web at theraventribe.com, where you can learn more information on membership, warrior training, as well as links to our official YouTube channel, Facebook group, apparel store, and our official bookstore, Marshall Books. Welcome back, Tribe. Today we bring you an interview in our Walking with Warriors series, a series of interviews where we ask 20 questions of some of the most dynamic and interesting warriors in the field today. Today our special guest is Alain Burrese. Alain, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing really great. I want to thank you for asking me on the show. It sounds like a fun interview and I'm really looking forward to it.
So Alain, you've been on the show, but for the audience tuning in for the first time, please tell us a little bit about yourself and especially how you got started in the martial arts.
Well, I guess I was always interested in martial arts, even as a little kid. You know, you had Bruce Lee was popular back then, Kung Fu TV series, even the Hong Kong Phooey on the cartoons on Saturday morning. Anything involving martial arts, I was interested in. And I remember in grade school going to the school library, and they had the thin martial art books by Fred Neff, and they had the books by Bruce Tegner. I'd check them out, and I'd go home and try to practice, sort of like Daniel on the first Karate Kid movie, trying to learn out of a book, because I really didn't have anything else available to me where I was living back then. Then in 1980, when we moved to Thompson Falls, Montana, and I was going to high school in 1982, a judo club started. And so that was my first formal martial art when I was in that judo club. And I actually competed in some different tournaments around Montana. Took a first place tournament in a tournament in Missoula one time. Got an ippon during that tournament, which, you know, is a perfect throw, got a win. And then I just really developed that one throw. Obviously, when something works for you, sometimes you have a tendency to just keep working on it. Later, and I never got the black belt, though, because the instructors moved from town. So then later, when I was in the military at Fort Bragg, you know, I was at Wolf's Karate down on Yadkin Road, and I trained there. Never got the black belt, you know, because of being in the field, a knee surgery, different things. I just went up color belts. Then I got transferred over to South Korea. I was in South Korea. I tried a little Taekwondo, and it just really wasn't for me. And I was just too busy with the Army at the time to devote myself to training. When I went to sniper school and when I went back as an assistant instructor, you know, you'd be 4 weeks. That's all you did. You had time for nothing else. So I didn't really do any training in Korea other than a little Taekwondo. Came back to the United States. I saw the movie Best of the Best, and I said, I really need to train. I want to learn something. So I started training under Dennis Dallas at the Helena Karate and Judo School. And he taught 3 different classes. He taught a karate class. He taught a judo class after the karate class a couple nights a week. But then at lunch, he taught a Hapkido class. And because of his instructors, one was Korean, one was Japanese, the Hapkido class had a Japanese influence. But I went to every class that I could go to, lunch, after, and even the judo that I could make, depending on my work schedule. And so I trained with him. I still didn't get to black belt level before I moved. And so I kept moving and training in different places. You know, when I moved to college, I went to the Toshikan Karate Club and I trained with them. Still didn't get the black belt. Then I went off and lived in Japan. Didn't have an opportunity to train over there, but learned a lot. Came back. Finished my first book, living in Riverside, California, training with Mark McYoung. And everybody kept asking, oh, it's a book on self-defense. What are you a black belt in? And I wasn't a black belt in anything. I had all these different color belts and all these different mismatch of training, a lot of practical experience, but no black belt. So in 1996, I decided I wanted a black belt. So I moved back to Korea, this time as a civilian, not with the military. And I devoted myself specifically to learning Hapkido. Minute I got there, I asked an English teacher, because I was teaching English to pay the bills, to help me find a Hapkido school. He introduced me to an instructor, said this was, you know, the best school in Gangneung. I started training there. After 1 week, I asked if I could go to the early morning class as well and the afternoon class. And so I started going twice a week and once on Saturday. So I went to 11 Hapkido classes a day. And then I actually started going to 5 Qigong, or 11 Hapkido classes a week, not a day. 2 a day, 11 a week. Then I started going to Qigong classes once a day for 5 days a week as well. So I was going to 16 classes a week at that school. And then I was teaching English at a Hagwon to pay the bills. I've been under those instructors ever since. And that's the art that I continue to teach. And I continue to go back to see those instructors. And all of my black belt ranks, which I'm currently a 5th Dan, a 5th degree black belt, are from that school and those instructors there. And I say those instructors because when I started teaching, Kim Young-jong owned the school, but Lee Jung-gyu was his sabum and did a lot of the teaching. Currently, Lee Jung-gyu moved away and has his own school. And so when I go back, I train primarily in Lee Jung-gyu's school, and I train under him, and he's the one that's promoted me. But I still go back to see Kwanjungnim Kim Young-jong. And I also go and see Kim Hyun, who was with Lee Jung-gyu under Kim Young-jong until he went and opened his own school too. And I've learned a lot from all 3 of those men, but I've probably learned the most from Lee Jung-gyu, and he's the one that's promoted me up to 5th Dan, and who I will continue to train under as long as I can.
So Alan, who are some of the most influential instructors that you've had? What can you tell us about them?
Well, I mentioned many of them in that previous question, but I can share a little bit more. I guess, it would be Dan Bullard and Alan Grantham, who started that judo club in Thompson Falls back in '82, because that was my first formal training. And I think judo is a great base. Getting to compete, learning the basic falls and throws and movement of judo was a good base for later on. Some of that falling saved me in different situations, nothing to do with fighting, bicycle accidents and stuff like that. So I'd have to credit those 2 for getting me started. Master Wolf at Wolf's Karate at Fayetteville, North Carolina, when I was stationed at Fort Bragg, they were just tough. So that was a fun training, and his influence was, just being tough and getting in there and not being afraid to mix it up. Then, Shihan Dennis Dallas, a great influence, an excellent technical martial artist. The precision and accuracy with his techniques, and then just a really good, solid, moral person. And I remember when I first started teaching, and I was discussing this with him, he told me, he's like, Alan, you can teach physical techniques. And if that's all you teach, you're missing out. If you're not teaching the character development and the things that can go along with the martial arts, you are missing out what you can be teaching and how you can be helping people through the martial arts. And that's always stayed with me. And he's been a great influence and mentor throughout my life. So Shihan Dennis Dallas, very influential. And then the 3 men that I mentioned that were my instructors in Korea. Kwanjungnim Kim Young-jong. While he didn't teach as much, the time with him, and how he also talked about how martial arts were changing and they had to change with the times and evolve. But also the time that he took with me to work on my back. I had back surgery when I was a baby. And I've had neurosurgeons when I was in my 40s telling me I shouldn't be able to do the stuff that I do. I just keep doing it. But Kwanjungnim, besides being a Hapkido school, he was a licensed chiropractor and had a chiropractic office there in Korea, and worked and helped me with my back and some different things when I had some injuries from training. So very influential. Then Sabunim Lee Jung-gyu, who is now Kwanjungnim Lee Jung-gyu because he has his own school, extremely influential because he is the one who has taught me most of the Hapkido that I know today. And just another really good person. tell you a story showing how influential he was and what kind of person he is. When I was living there and training 2 times a day, once on Saturday, I had my own place and I was teaching English to pay the bills. I got my first dawn and came back to America to apply for law school. I got accepted to law school, so I wanted to go back to Korea the summer before law school to do more training towards my second dawn and to see who's now my wife. So at the time we had been seeing each other when I was in Korea, so I wanted to go back and rekindle that relationship, make sure it was still there before we did the work to bring her to America and get married. So I went over there that summer thinking I knew a person that owned a small hotel. They'd probably give me a good deal. I have credit cards. I'm just going to pay for the hotel and my food, do it as cheap as I can, train as much as I can, and spend time with Isang. That was the plan. I got to Korea. Lee Jung-gyu said, no. His parents owned what is called a minbak, which is a small type of hotel, and it was down by the beach on Gangneung. He said, you stay here. So they gave me my own room and bathroom, and then I ate all the meals with the family. Lee Jung-gyu was teaching 4 classes a day at that time, so I went to all 4 classes. So I was going to 21 classes, 4 a day for the week and the Saturday morning classes. So I was going to 21 classes a week that summer, and I was living there at my instructor's, his parents' minbak, because that's where he lived too, because he wasn't married yet at that time. And so I was eating with the family, training all day. But, that's the kind of person he is and the kind of relationship we built. And that's sort of like a dream, run off to Korea, live with a martial art instructor and train all day. But that's what I did for that summer before law school. Now when I go back, he obviously is married and has kids and a family. I don't stay with him, but, I have my wife and we usually stay with her family and such. So I still have a place to stay when I go over there and do all the training that I can. So those are the most influential instructors and a little bit more about them.
Alan, what is the current art that you're focusing your training on? Where do you spend most of your time training?
Currently, I really focus on Hapkido. That's my primary art, and I don't have any goals of learning or developing another formal style. I'm a Hapkidoan. There's enough in Hapkido that keeps me busy, and I want to be the best Hapkido instructor I can. However, I also train and teach a form of, what you call modern combatives. Kelly McCann, Lee Morrison being 2 that have influenced me. And what that is for is when I teach standalone self-defense programs or the active shooter response programs. When I'm teaching people that don't want to learn a formal martial art, I can't teach them all this Hapkido that I know. It takes a long time to learn that. So I teach them bare bones basics for self-defense and defending themselves. And I train in that as well. I'll also bring in some knife work and some groundwork and some things that might be a little less in Hapkido just to help round myself out. But as far as a formal martial art, Hapkido is the primary art that I practice and the primary art that I teach.
What can you tell us about the art that you train in, Hapkido? Where does it come from? What's its history?
Hapkido is a Korean art. It can be translated into the way of coordinated power. Hapkido, that's what it can translate to. Now, in a nutshell, the history, Chae Young-sul was a Korean who lived in Japan. It's debated what his relationship with Takeda was. Some say it was more of a servant, some say it was more of an adopted son. Now, Takeda was famous for the Aikijujutsu, and his student Morei Ueshiba, O-sensei of Aikido, formed Aikido out of the Aikijujutsu. Chae Young-sul, after World War II, went back to Korea. Regardless what his relationship with Takeda was, he knew the art. He knew the joint locking and the throws and such. And he started teaching. Now, some of his students also added the kicking, which the Korean arts are known for, and Hapkido has some fantastic kicking in it, and that was more from his students. And it went through a couple name changes, but then it finally took on the name Hapkido. And Grandmaster Jihan Jay was very influential in that. And some people will call him Dojunim. My instructors in Korea, they call Che Young Sul Dojo Nim, so that's what I go with. The Che Young Sul was the founder, but some will call Grandmaster Jihan Jay the founder. But regardless, they were both influential in the development of the art that we know today as Hapkido. Now, Che Young Sul died in 1986. Grandmaster Jihan Jay is still teaching. He lives in America and still teaches today, and I think he's in his 80s and still teaching. One of the first introductions to Hapkido in the United States was the cult classic movie Billy Jack. If you remember the scene where he says, I'm going to take this right foot and whop you on that side of your face, if you watch that scene, the kicks are actually done by Grandmaster Bong-Soo Han, a Korean Hapkido master who had moved to the Los Angeles area, had a school in Santa Monica. If you watch the next movie, The Trial of Billy Jack, Grandmaster Bong-Soo Han actually had a speaking role. There's a scene in there where Jean is learning the art and Billy walks up and says, karate? And she goes, no, Hapkido. And Billy's like, oh, I know that, but you learning it? And Grandmaster Han and Billy Jack both do a cane technique, one of the weapons Hapkido's known for. And Grandmaster Bong-Soo Han and Billy Jack, they fight together on the same side against the town at the end of that movie. So that was one of the first influences that I had of Hapkido. And it was sort of because of that movie that made me want to learn it later on and start training and choose it to be the art that I've continued to do. And I was very fortunate that I actually got to train with Bong-Soo Han before he passed away. So that's a little bit in a nutshell about Hapkido and its history and some influences here in the United States.
So from your point of view, what are some of the most unique features of Hapkido? As far as the concepts, training, the applications, what do you find most interesting about the art?
Well, Hapkido has 3 big principles that are taught within a lot of the techniques and the things that you learn. And those are water, harmony, and circles. And those principles encompass a lot. I mean, you remember Bruce Lee talked about water. It could be hard, it could be soft, and that's just one aspect of water. Water also flows. So when we're looking at Hapkido techniques, we're looking at where can you hit hard, where can you be soft, where can you flow around to get the technique that you need. So water is important. The harmony, I told you that Hapkido meant the way of coordinated power. We coordinate our power with the enemy. We don't just go blunt force against blunt force. We look at how we can redirect their energy, use their energy to maximize our efficiency. And in this way, a smaller person can defeat a larger person by using their energy against them and correct technique. So that's important. And then we have circles. Circles can be found all over in the Hapkido curriculum. Some of the footwork patterns where we're stepping in a circular motion. Some of what we're doing with our hands in a circular. We're turning them in a circle. So we look for the circles and the force that can be generated and the applications that can be done using circles. So those 3 combined do make Hapkido a little unique. And then as an art itself, it's fairly comprehensive. There are weapons, there are striking techniques, there are kicking techniques, there are joint lock techniques, there are throwing techniques. You learn how to fall. The particular style and system that I'm under, we do forms. So there are a lot of things in Hapkido to make it a pretty complete, comprehensive art with a focus on self-defense. And I always like to say that, you don't have to learn an awful lot to defend yourself. And that's why I mentioned earlier that I do the combatives training as well. So I think Hapkido has 2 focuses. 1, there's a self-defense focus. 2, there's a traditional martial art self-betterment focus. Some of what we do in Hapkido isn't necessary to learn to fight out in the parking lot, but it can help build attributes within you that can help you be a better fighter. It can also help build a stronger mind, mental discipline, and those aspects that you can learn through studying a traditional martial art that may be lacking if all you're learning to do is fighting techniques to fight in the parking lot. So we don't really have a sport element. It's not a physical fitness class. It is a traditional martial art with a self-defense emphasis.
Another related question, what's your favorite aspect of Hapkido?
I probably have two favorite aspects of Hapkido. The first being the joint locks. I really enjoy learning, studying, practicing joint locks, and then teaching them. Even though I have only used a handful of the joint locks I've learned and that I teach in real situations, I enjoy learning and practicing and teaching all of them because I just find it fascinating to study the human body and how the twisting or manipulation of certain joints of the body create the pain or the effects that you want. And I believe that I've been able to break that down and I can teach that better. And that's why the joint lock DVDs I've put out are popular. And that's why I made those DVDs, because I wasn't seeing that in other instruction. Understanding the concept of why the joint lock works, then you're able to perform it better. So I really like the joint locks. And then I also like the cane. The cane is one of my favorite weapons, probably again why I did a video with Alain Burrese on that, because I think everybody can have the ability to learn how to use a cane to defend themselves, and it's something they can take anywhere. Even in airports, on airplanes, you can take your cane. So the cane training and the joint locks, those are my favorite parts of Hapkido. I like it all, but those are the favorites.
Alan, does your Hapkido training include training in weaponry?
Yes. As I mentioned, the cane, which is my favorite weapon, but the most known Hapkido weapons that you'll find in most schools, you have the dan bong, or the short stick baton. You have the bong, a 6-foot staff is often used. Gum, the sword. Often at the lower belts, in Korea, we use the bamboo sword. Later on, you would get to a blade when you're up in the black belt levels. You have the sanjul bong, which is nunchucks, made popular by Bruce Lee, but they use them there in Korea as well. And D techniques, or belt techniques are popular in the upper levels of Hapkido. You learn how to defend yourself and joint lock and wrap a person up with a belt. And then again, the jipangi, the cane, which is my favorite weapon. So those are the most common weapons used, with the staff and the short stick and the bamboo sword being used usually for colored belts. The nunchucks also used for colored belts, where an actual live blade sword, the belt techniques, the cane techniques, usually being found in the black belt levels. I personally teach cane to everybody because, like I said earlier, it's my favorite and I like it, and I want people to know how to defend themselves with it. But in Korea, it was sort of divided. You didn't start learning cane until you were a black belt. But those are the common weapons found in Hapkido. For defense, you will find some knife defense and some firearm defense techniques, and maybe a little bit of offense stuff with knife in Hapkido, but not as predominant. Mainly it's the defenses against the basic knife work and some defenses against handguns, long guns. So you do find those as well.
What can you tell us about the role of weapons in your martial art?
I believe the weapons are just an extension of your empty hand techniques. You learn to strike with your empty hands, then you learn to strike with weapons. You learn to block with your empty hands, you learn to block with weapons. We learn to joint lock and throw with our empty hands, then you start learning how to joint lock and throw with your weapons. With that said, it is much easier to learn how to strike, and that can be empty-handed or with a weapon, than it is to joint lock or throw empty-handed or with a weapon. So some of the fancy throwing and joint lock techniques, say, that we do with the cane, I don't believe those are as practical for a real self-defense situation as some of the basic striking and other techniques that we learn. But when you're learning a martial art, and we're learning the balance and coordination and all of the other things that come with a martial art, that's where those weapons become an extension, and we have some of those fancier, maybe not practical, techniques that are found within the Hapkido curriculum. I actually even had a little kid one time. I was doing a demonstration, and this young boy came up and said, after I did a fancy flipping type cane technique, if you're an old man with a cane, how could you do that? I mean, a sharp kid. Because if you were an elderly person that actually needed a cane to get around, you wouldn't be doing these fancy spinning drop to the knee, flipping this guy cane technique that are part of the art of Hapkido and that are great for demonstrations. You'd be doing a more simple technique that would probably involve a strike or a jab type of movement rather than spinning, dropping to a knee, flipping a person over. But the good thing that I like about Hapkido is they're all there. You know, the fancy weapon techniques and the really simple practical ones. They are all there to give you the practical things, the things that can save you on the street, as well as the more complex things to learn, practice, develop, and become a more complete martial artist to self-better yourself both physically and mentally. Because some of that fancy stuff is a mental discipline to be able to learn and perform as well. So that's, again, one of the reasons why I like Hapkido so much. It has all ranges of that spectrum.
How would you classify your art? Is it something that's focused on sport, self-defense, or more health-oriented?
Hapkido is a traditional martial art with a self-defense emphasis. And by that, most of the techniques are designed more for self-defense, not sport. So we don't have the competition and the sport aspect as, say, Taekwondo, which is also from Korea. And while there are elements of Hapkido, such as the Donjon breathing, that can improve our health, its sole focus is not on developing health like maybe some other arts, such as a Qigong. Qigong in Chinese, Qigong, Korean pronunciation. So I like to look at it as being a traditional art that teaches tradition and some of the formal things that a martial art can teach, with self-defense applications and an emphasis, rather than physical fitness and sport, which are the two other big areas that martial arts will sometimes fall into.
Alan, you've been teaching for a long time. I'd like to know how you got started.
Well, I've sort of always been teaching. I mean, if we go back to the military, after I went to sniper school, I was asked to come back as an assistant instructor. And so I was an assistant instructor for a number of cycles at sniper school. Then during my undergraduate in the early 90s, I developed a class and I taught it for 2 years, Strategies for Success, under the Honors College. And I always liked speaking and teaching, so it's always been sort of a part of me. So when I came back from Korea to go to law school, nobody in this area was doing what I do. And what I teach is, for Hapkido, is the Korean Hapkido Federation curriculum. That's what I went up through for my first and my second Dan. Now, after that, I got my third, fourth, and fifth Dan from Lee Jung-gyu, but under a different organization, because he changed organizations for his reasons in Korea. So when he promoted me under the organization he was currently affiliated with. But I still teach the Korea Hapkido Federation curriculum because it's what I know the best. It's what I spent all that time learning and going up and testing on. I have the Korea Hapkido Federation training manual, so if I forget the order number 2 and number 3 technique, I can look, make sure I'm teaching my students in the same order, just so when they're comparing notes, they're on the same page. So nobody was doing that here in Missoula, Montana, and anywhere local. And so Shihan Dennis Dallas, again, one of the mentors in martial arts, he told me, start teaching. He goes, you'll get better, and you'll keep your skills, and you'll develop your skills, and teaching will make you better. Just remember, like I mentioned earlier, he told me, make sure you're teaching more than just the physical. If you're not teaching the character and, being a better person and the other attributes you can learn through martial arts, you're missing out. And I took that to heart and I tried to do that. I'm friends with Mark McYoung. We were living in California and training together, working together in with the exotic dancers at night, training during the day when I was writing my first book before I went over to Korea to learn Hapkido. He told me, teach, you'll get better. Just teach. If you remember Chuck Norris, he came back as a first degree black belt and started teaching so he would get better, and he started competing just to get more students. Teach. So I started teaching once a week with the Taekwondo program that was at the university. Then, and that was my first year of law school. Then my second year of law school, a friend who had a Taekwondo school, he said, Alan, why don't you teach Hapkido here? You can have your own time spot. You just do your thing, because I'd like to learn from you as well. So I started teaching there. Then after a year or so, he had to move. He got a different job out of state. He left Missoula, Montana. But some of his students, they moved the program over to Gold's Gym. And they were doing Taekwondo out of Gold's Gym. And I said, Alan, why don't you come over and do your Hapkido at Gold's too, so we can keep learning some of that from you. So I started doing Hapkido a couple nights a week out of the Gold's Gym. The Taekwondo instructors ended up leaving for different reasons, moving out of state as well. And then it was just down to Hapkido. And I've been there. It was Gold's Gym from about 2000 to a couple years ago, where they dropped the franchise and now it's Ridge Fitness, but it's still been the same place. I've had a great group of students. Some come and go. Some have been there for a long time. They've helped me with videos I've filmed. It's a good atmosphere. We have a good little program, and it's helped me become better. Teaching does, like I was told by my friends and mentors, teaching does make you better. It's one thing to do something. It's a whole other thing to be able to break it down, explain it, and help someone else learn it. And so I think that has made me a better martial artist. And I think I've had the teaching skills that I brought from beforehand, and I tried to study on how to be a better instructor to help my students. Because it's my goal that they not only know a technique, but they know the why and the what behind the technique, why it works, how they're doing it affects different things of the opponent's body, how they're generating more power and strength through the leverage and proper body mechanics. Putting all that stuff into teaching to help my students become better than I actually am. That's a goal of a good instructor, is to help students become better than they are. And so that's sort of my journey of how I got started. And, I had the blessings of those different instructors. I had the blessings of my instructors in Korea to start teaching here because no one else around was doing what I do.
Your teaching background is pretty diverse. What kind of teaching are you currently doing?
I currently teach in 3 distinct different areas. The first area is more business related. I have productivity, negotiation, conflict resolution, and effective communication programs that I teach to both attorney groups with continuing legal education seminars, as well as different businesses and organizations that bring me in to teach on those topics. Then when we get into martial arts and self-defense, I divide that into 2 different areas too. And that's why I have 2 different websites. For martial arts, I focus primarily on Hapkido. That's my primary martial art. That's what I do. That's what I teach. And I teach that in a variety of different ways. Here in Missoula, I have the regular classes where you can come, you can start as a white belt, you can work your way up through black belt ranks, go through that whole Korea Hapkido Federation curriculum, test, gain your black belt, and then keep on going to higher level black belts. I also travel, and I'll be going down to the Korea Martial Art Festival here in April. I teach at that every year. Those, I'm just teaching a little portion of Hapkido depending on what I'm doing that year. Other groups will bring me in maybe to teach a Hapkido cane seminar for a day. So I'm just teaching that part of Hapkido. Or they might bring me in just to teach a joint lock seminar. So I'm teaching joint locks only, which is only part of what Hapkido encompasses. So I will travel and teach whatever people want to learn related to Hapkido. Here locally, I teach the entire curriculum so people can advance up through the belts to black belt. Now, when we get into the self-defense area, that third area that I teach on, it's more short programs to teach people how to defend themselves quickly. So it's more of a combatives type or modern combatives type look at things. Very simple, gross motor techniques. You know, a hammer fist, a palm heel to the face, learning some basic elbows, stomping some knees. So basic strikes, basic kicks, knee strikes to help someone defend themselves fast. And it might be using a tactical pin or even a regular pencil or bic to jam in a guy's eye or slamming the ears. Then I follow up with those kind of programs with the active shooter response work that I'm doing. Now, I'm on a team here in Missoula where we have taught thousands of people. I think it's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 people now in our community. And this is over like the last 3 or 4 years we've been doing this 8-hour class. But every month we're teaching several of these classes to groups of teachers from the public school system, employees from the university, employees from different businesses and hospitals and entities in the Missoula community. And this is an 8-hour program that I'm one of a team that teaches these 8-hour courses. I also have my own individual active shooter response that's not identical to the one with the team because I can't do some components without a team. But I do have programs that I take to businesses and places where I do active shooter response training. And the length of that course depends on what they want, whether it's a short, just little speech on what they can do, or a longer program that gets into different instruction on self-defense, instruction on barricading, trauma aid, weapons disarms from an active shooter situation. So it depends on what the group wants or needs and can bring me in to teach those. So to recap, I'm teaching some business programs. I'm teaching Hapkido locally, and when martial art groups bring me to different places to teach Hapkido principles and techniques and strategies. And I'm teaching self-defense and active shooter response programs to different groups that aren't interested in martial arts, but they're wanting to know ways to defend themselves and protect themselves from some of the things that are going on in the world today.
Have you branched out into other aspects of training, such as books, videos, websites? What can you tell us about how you're reaching out to your students?
I have. I actually started thinking about my first book back in '94, and I talked to Mark McYoung about it. He thought, yeah, that's a good idea. So when I was living in Japan, I started playing with it, came back from Japan in '95, finished the book. That's when I moved to California, Riverside. You know, Mark and I were training in the day, working with exotic dancers at night, and he was giving me some advice on how to tidy up the book and get it ready for publishing. Sent it off to Paladin Press, got a contract, and it was published in '96. And that was hard-won wisdom from the School of Hard Knocks. Mark wrote the foreword for it. It's now out with a revised and expanded edition that I did a few years ago after I got the rights back from Paladin. I added quite a bit to it, changed a few things, put it out by myself with an expanded revised edition. You know, I also wrote How to Protect Yourself by Developing a Fighter's Mindset. That was inspired by Jeff Cooper's Principles of Self-Defense. Very good little book of his. I wanted something similar, but I wanted a little bit more meat to it. So it's a little longer, goes a little more in depth. And I was pretty honored when there's a review out there on the internet that compared it to that, saying that mine had a little bit more actionable stuff than his. Take nothing away from his classic. It's an awesome book. But I was proud to put out something that and achieve the goal that I wanted to help people with some concepts of protecting themselves more on the mental aspects than the physical. I've put out a couple books, 101 Safety and Self-Defense Tips and 101 More Safety and Self-Defense Tips, that just give a bunch of lessons, obviously 101 in each book, from a lot of different authors. Not only will you learn some valuable lessons, you can see what these other authors have out there, and you can increase your own self-defense library. And then I wrote Lost Conscience, which is actually a novel, but it includes elements of sniping. It includes elements of Hapkido. It includes elements of combatives in the storyline. And so if you like a good action story, The Lost Conscience, a Ben Baker sniper novel, that fits those. I've also have a couple books that you can find out there on tough guy movie quotes. Those were just for fun. If you like tough guy movies, it's tough guy movie quotes and trivia. Then if we back up, those are the books I have out there available right now. For DVDs, I started with Paladin Press again because they had published my first book. And so I did Hapkido Hoshinsel with them. And that video is primarily joint locks with a couple throws. And then I went on to do Street Fighting Essentials with them, which is more of a basic self-defense video set. There's 2 discs, and it's just a really basic curriculum for teaching basic self-defense. Then I also did the Hapkido cane with them. 3 hours of Hapkido cane instruction on 2 discs. I think that's one of the most complete instructional materials you can find on learning how to use the cane. And it has both the fancy techniques found in Hapkido and the real simple things to defend yourself. So that's a great set, especially for the price, $40 it's on it. Then I started doing videos with Ike Productions instead of Paladin. I did a 5-set DVD set on joint locks, wrist locks on the first one, arm bars on the second, shoulder on the third, finger on the fourth, and then some combination locks and different things on the fifth. So that 5-volume set, a lot of stuff on joint locks to teach you how to effectively use those kind of techniques. I put out a 2-disc set on restraint control and come-along techniques, really aimed at security-type personnel that need to control people without hurting them. And then I also did a Chokes and Sleepers DVD, just because it's an area of self-defense and competition, judo, MMA, that I think is important. And so I tried to teach a variety of chokes, sleeper holds that can be used both for competition and others for different street situations, because I've used them in both, way back when I was in judo, and then I've had to use choke and sleeper techniques in actual confrontations before, and I think they're very effective. So those are the 7 books and the 11 DVDs that I have selling right now, but there are more to come.
Now here's a delicate question, but have you ever had to use your martial arts in real life? And if you did, what lessons did you learn from those experiences?
I have, and my book, Hard-Won Wisdom, is all about some personal experiences that I either had or friends had that I witnessed. And remember, I was never a black belt when I wrote that, but the stuff from judo, especially that one throw, it's a modified hip throw where you grab around the neck, where I just sort of drag down. I teach that in the Hapkido Hoshinsel DVD, but that was a modified throw of the one I did in judo with the ippon, and I've used that on a number of real situations and real street fights, and it worked very well. Just the striking, the kicking, the elbowing, everything you learned in the karate and some of that, it come to play in some of those real fights. And so I talked about some of the experiences that I had and what I learned from them in that book. Now, when we get into Hapkido, I have used some of those joint locks while I'm working security. I've done a lot of concert security. I said I worked with the exotic dancers in California, but up here in Montana, I've done a lot of concert and event security. Football games, basketball games, a variety of different concerts. Next month I'll be working an Elton John concert when he's here in Montana. And during some of those concerts, I have used different joint locks to take people outside. I haven't used all of them that I train in and I know. I usually go back to a few certain ones, the bread and butter favorites, and I've used those on multiple occasions. And that involves a chicken wing type escorting lock, and it involves a couple wrist gooseneck type escorting locks. I've used those to take people outside. I have used choke and sleeper, primarily sleeper holds in real situations at different times throughout my life. I think they're very effective, and that's why I did that DVD on them. So one of the things I've learned about using things for real versus using them in the training is they're not always the same. Sometimes you're just sort of lucky and you get something that's close and it's good enough. If you have the right mental mindset going in there that you're going to get it done, you're not going to lose, and this is the way it's going to be, that goes a long ways. So having that strong mental component with the physical can see you through. And that's especially for self-defense, but for working as well. You have to take command of the situation when you're working. So a lot of it isn't just the technique, it's your whole demeanor. And when you put a pain compliance hold on someone, you have to tell them what you want them to do. When they do it, you let off some of the pain. You reward them for the behavior you want, so they will start listening to you. If I have a pain compliant hold on and I tell them to do something and they do it and I don't let off the pain, why would they want to keep doing what I tell them? So that's an important lesson too, is you let off some of the pain if the person does what you want. You reward them, they listen, you get them outside, you do what you have to do. So those are a couple little experiences that I have had and a couple little lessons that you can take from the dojang or the dojo out into the real world of working and or self-defense.
So Alan, you're always busy. What can you tell us about the current projects that you're working on?
I'm working on a number of things. The primary book that I want to finish this year and get out there is Survive a Shooting. And it's strategies, techniques, principles for surviving an active shooter or any other active threat. Because they're not always with firearms. We see active threats with vehicles, explosives, knives, bladed weapons, as well as the firearms. So I'm working on a book to cover the different things that a person can do to survive such an incident. I also want to have an online course for people to learn some of these strategies and techniques, principles, for when they cannot bring me there to teach them in person. I have a couple other book ideas that are in various stages. I also have some videos that I'd like to film some more DVDs. One being where the head goes, the body follows. It'll all be about head and neck control techniques, taking people down using the head and neck to control individuals. I'd like to put out some more self-defense geared DVDs and programs probably online that will be for those people that don't want to learn the martial art but want to defend themselves. And I'm trying to explore how I can do both DVD and more online courses now, because that seems to be where people are going. But I want to put out both. And so I'm working on a variety of projects. Sometimes it's difficult for me to figure out which one to prioritize, but the Survive a Shooting information, that's the big priority for this year, and then some other projects as I can work them in.
Now, I know this is a subject near and dear to your heart, Alan. Please tell me what your view is of warriorship as a lifestyle. Do you follow any particular warrior path?
I study a variety of materials from past and current warriors, or those in the different warrior professions. And that could be from the samurai, it could be from the knights, it can be from modern day Navy SEALs or special forces. I study them all and look at them and try to cherry pick the best to live as what I call with the warrior's edge. And that is the edge you get by living as a warrior. And that's things such as having discipline in your life, physical fitness, having honor, having courage, these different principles that we associate with warriors, and I cherry pick to try to develop that edge for myself. And I'm not so naive to think that all warriors throughout history have lived by these. I mean, if you actually study the samurai, you will find that some of them weren't the nicest people, and some of the stuff they did back then would be horrendous to folks today. but the romanticized version of the samurai, being noble, living by the virtues of Budo, honor, and courage. What's wrong with taking those and using those to make yourself better? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And that's why I try to take these different traits from the different warrior cultures to help me be a better person. And then I try to teach that through your Warrior's Edge teachings to other people to help them live with what I call the Warrior's Edge. You know, an example, when I was in college way back when, I took a big course load that first quarter. And the advocate that was helping me with my classes, she's like, hey, do you really think you should be doing all these classes? You've been out of school for 5 years. You have honors courses in here. That's pretty heavy load. And I looked at her and said, I'm a sniper. I can do it. And her eyes sort of got big. She didn't know what I was talking about, but I knew what I was talking about because as a military sniper, you know, I think one of the elites of the warriors in the military, you learn things. You are disciplined. Mission first. You get it done. And that's what I did that first quarter of college. I got straight A's. I got it done. And I continued to go on. And so even though I wasn't in the military anymore, I'm not a current military sniper anymore, that mental part of it is still inside me. And so that's what I call the Warrior's Edge. And whether I get it from my time in the military, whether I get it from my instructors in Korea, whether I get it from Shihan Dennis Dallas, whether I get it from reading The Art of War, or Miyamoto Musashi, or any other of the texts, I cherry pick the best to make me the best person with those warrior attributes. And that's what I think the warriorship lifestyle is all about, and why I think it's so powerful and can actually help people live more powerfully when they live with courage, when they live with discipline, when they live with honor. You know, those are the common core traits that we need to have to be the best that we can be.
Now, you and I are very much in agreement that the martial arts are not just about punching and kicking people. Tell me, how have the warrior arts helped you in your personal life?
I think they've helped me in a lot of different ways. You know, first and foremost, yes, I have used different things that I've learned in martial art and self-defense classes to defend myself. I have used them working, as I said, in the security. But way more than that, you know, the judo falls I learned have saved me in bicycle accidents, slipping on the ice, and different things. The mental stuff, though, has been way more. I mentioned in college about getting straight A's that first quarter and continuing to do so because of that mindset. A lot of other things that I've done, it's that same mindset. You know, the warrior doesn't give up. He's disciplined. He does what he has to do. Now, I haven't always been disciplined in every single thing I've done in my life, sadly. I don't think anybody has. But the discipline I've learned through the military and martial arts has helped me do an awful lot. But I think if I had to narrow it down to the most important thing that I have been helped by because of the warrior arts, it would be the relationships that I have made with others in the warrior arts. The relationships with my instructors and relationships with friends all over the world, and literally all over the world, because I have friends in Australia, Canada, all over Europe, Japan, Korea, all of them because of my training in the martial arts. And so those relationships have been probably the best thing that I have gotten out of my years of martial arts study. You know, Mark McYoung, I mentioned earlier, helped me, and he wrote the foreword for my first book, got me into the book arena, which then led to creating the DVDs. I'm going down to Florida here in a couple months to teach again. I'm going to see some great individuals, men and ladies, that I have met because of martial arts. I'm not going to see a good friend, Jeff, who's from Australia. He's been there every year for the last number of years, but he won't make it this year, so I'm not going to get to see him. But I'm going to see people from Canada. I'm going to see people from all over. And that's just the most important thing. The friendships, the relationships made because of my studying of the warrior arts, that's number one. Everything else is just sort of a benefit, but you just can't beat the people that I've met because of the training.
So, Alan, for the audience at home, give us 3 titles that you feel should be in every warrior's bookshelf, and why.
Wow, now that's quite a question because I love to read, and narrowing it down to 3 is tough. I'll first say, obviously, everything that I write should be on your shelf. That's a given. But 3 books that should be on every warrior's bookshelf. I'd probably have to start with The Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. I read that way back in the 80s for the first time when it came out, and I've been a fan of Dan Millman's ever since. I've been fortunate enough to communicate with him a little bit through email. I haven't met him in person yet, but I like everything Dan has written. And I think you should have that piece, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and then read the sequels. Interesting tidbit, he has a new book, a continuation of the Peaceful Warrior series coming out here in a few months later this year. So why? There's so much into that book. And when you read it at different times like I have, I got something different each time I read it. But one of the most important things, and he actually wrote a book with the same title, was, there are no ordinary moments. I love that lesson. And then he wrote that book, which wasn't a story like the Peaceful Warrior books or novelizations with some lessons in them. But, No Ordinary Moments was a book that he wrote, just straight nonfiction. But that is such an important lesson. There are no ordinary moments in our lives. So Dan Millman, The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, and anything else that Dan Millman wrote, I've enjoyed all of those, would be number 1. Number 2, I'd have to put Living the Martial Way by Forrest Morgan up there. I've read that a number of times since I first read it years and years ago. He was from the Air Force, so he has a military background, and he has a martial art background, and just a lot of good, solid information about being a good martial artist. I like the stuff he wrote about tactics and strategy, about training. He wrote about honor. He got into actually, the suicide seppuku and what that had to do with honor. So I think anybody studying martial arts and wanting to live as a warrior, Living the Martial Way by Forrest Morgan needs to be up there. And, have to pick another one that had some impact on me when I read it, was In Search of the Warrior Spirit by Richard Strozzi Heckler. And that was about his time. He was an Hapkido person, and he went under contract to work with a group of Army Special Forces, Green Berets, teaching them some stuff from his art to how they could make them better. And it was a unique dynamic because you have a bunch of, tough special forces, some of the best the military has, and they're like, what's this new age Aikido guy going to teach us to make us better at what we do? And how it works out, there are some lessons there. And when I first read that book in the mid-90s, I had been in the military. I was with the 82nd Airborne, but I worked with some of the Green Berets, Special Forces at times. And when I was over in South Korea, I worked with some SF guys too. And so I was familiar with that world, and I'm familiar with the martial art world. And so it was interesting to see how those two blended together, because I found that kind of stuff with my own self. I can take the stuff from the martial arts and some of the stuff that even seems woo-woo or, oh, what's that stuff? And I can see the applications, the street applications, the military applications, where it can make our combat soldiers better. And so I like that book, and that story by Richard Strozzi Heckler of how he did that and the way the attitudes changed and what he learned about himself when he was working with them. So if I had to narrow it down to 3 books, which you're making me do, those 3, definitely should be on the bookshelf, along with a lot of others. I'll put a plug out there. Reading and studying the ancient texts, The Art of War, the Book of Five Rings, and many things like that. Those should be on your list too, because we got to develop our mind as well as our body, and we can learn from the past and the present. So read, train. They go together to make you the best that you can be.
What advice would you give to the audience at home to help them on their path, on their personal warrior journey?
I think, thinking back to what I just said, Dan Millman's quote, "There are no ordinary moments." I think that's a big one. I'm turning 50 here in a couple weeks. And, as you age, you start thinking, we have less time. And you start realizing just how valuable our time really is. And people are saying it all over, but I don't think a lot of us listen until it finally hits us and we realize, wow, we only have limited time. And it's the one thing that we're never going to get back. You can lose all your money and make it back. You can lose some of your health and still get healthy again. Time, when it's gone, it's gone. You don't get it back. And none of us know how much we have left. And it makes it so important to spend our time doing the positive things that we can do for ourselves, to keep ourselves healthy, and to help ourselves be the best we can be, so we can then give back to others and help others be the best they can be, and help others that are not as fortunate as we are. I think that really is the most important thing. And when we're looking at our martial arts, we have to realize that we need to be there at every given moment, and we just step by step. You don't learn everything right away. It takes putting in the time. It takes the discipline and the dedication to learn and develop ourselves. But it's worth it. It's worth it because besides just the physical skills, we're developing those mental skills, and then we can pass those on to others that are coming up after us. And we can honor those that have been there before us by passing their lessons, both by living them and passing them on to others. And I really think, as I said earlier about the relationships of martial artists, if we can build those positive relationships and we can get past the fighting and the things that you see going on in the news and work toward effective communication and have the courage to be effective agents for the change that's going to make ourselves and the world better, that's really the way to go. And, that's a little soapboxy and preachy, but so be it. I honestly believe that. It starts with each and every one of us. And I think as martial artists and those that are training in a discipline, we should use that discipline for good and that we can do better things out there. And we need to do it now because we don't know how much time we have left. So we should be spending each and every day maximizing what we can do that's productive and beneficial. And that doesn't mean you can't play a video game or watch a movie. Sometimes that's productive and beneficial because we all need rest and relaxation. Sometimes spending that extra just quiet alone time with a significant other or our children or our parents or our best friend, that's the most productive thing you can do because you're helping develop those relationships. It's not always going 100% on producing something, a new videos, new writing, new this, new work every day. Those other things can be as important, sometimes more important, and we need to not neglect those either. We got to spend the time with what's important. And that is going to be spending time with loved ones. It is going to be spending time making sure that you're healthy and you're keeping yourself in shape, because you got to look out after yourself before you can look out after others. So that's, I think, the most important thing. There are no ordinary moments. So we need to use every moment that we have, making sure it's productive and developing the things that we want to develop and pursuing the goals that we have set, fostering the relationships that we have. That, I think, is the journey that we're all on. We're all on a journey to achieve goals and develop relationships and be the best that we can. And we need to just make sure we're paying attention that the activities we're doing are helping us achieve those and help us advance on that journey that we're all sort of on, and hopefully we can come together and be on that journey together, because I think we can get farther together than we can by ourselves.
Alain, before we wrap up, please tell the audience where they can reach out to you if they'd like to train with you or pick up some of the products that you offer or just correspond with you.
I'm pretty easy to find all over the internet. So if you're a Facebook fan, my Alain Burrese is a personal page. I have the Alain Burrese public figure page, which is more motivational and business related. Survive and Defend is the page where I talk more about self-defense, active shooter response, safety issues. Your Warrior's Edge, that's the page where I talk more about Hapkido, living with the Warrior's Edge like I described earlier, and martial art related things. And with those, I have the corresponding websites. Go to yourwarriorsedge.com for martial arts, Hapkido information. You can contact me through that page as well. Has some of my DVDs and books there. You can go to surviveanddefend.com, and then you'll see the self-defense, active shooter, those kind of safety lessons. You can download a free ebook there, 25 safety and self-defense tips, and you'll get my weekly Sunday safety self-defense email, as well as some bonus lessons. I'm currently working on the Burrese.com website, which will focus on the business aspects of things. And when that's up and running, you'll be able to go there for negotiation, conflict resolution, productivity stuff. So any of those can get you to me and ask questions. I'm glad to help people out. And please reach out and contact me at any of those sites and let me know what I can do to help you on your journey.
Again, Alain, thank you for being on the show. It's been a pleasure. It's always great to have you on, and we look forward to having you on in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you asking me on. Please let me know if there's anything I can ever do for you or your listeners. Be happy to do it again. So, again, thank you very much for having me on the show. I've enjoyed it.